here to the Strategy and Soul, Center, Reverend Munther Isaac. Let's welcome him and celebrate. And how the flow will be is we've asked Reverend Isaac to present for us and frame, for us, his message to us in the belly of the beast for such a time as this. And he'll do that, and then afterwards, we'll invite him here for some for a conversation, for some Q&A where we can engage him, in some, question and answers, but conversation around where we are and where we need to go and what we need to do, not just in the United States, but right here in the city and county of Los Angeles. Reverend Isaac.
Thank you. Good morning. Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God." It's good to be here, yet it's hard. And I've been on a tour for the last, I forgot by now, 10 days, speaking in churches and meeting amazing people like you. And I say it's been hard because we're still calling for a ceasefire. And literally yesterday as I was speaking, my phone beeped. 100 people died while they were praying. They were killed while they were praying. And I wish I could share the images. I chose not to on my social media. They're so horrifying. People deserve to be to die and to be buried in dignity, not in body parts as the images we've seen. All of this underlines the urgency of the moment. A genocide is taking place in our world, and we're watching. This is the urgency of the current moment we are in. And for my brief time before we have a conversation, I choose to highlight just a few points. First, and when people see me as a pastor speak about this, I want to emphasize this is not a religious conflict. We don't have a religious conflict in Palestine. In fact, as I always say, we don't have a conflict in Palestine. This myth that this is a conflict between Jews and Muslims, or actually between two worldviews, the Judeo-Christian tradition versus Islam, only serves the empire to continue its war machine. We need to be careful. And I say this because the empire actually tries to put us in enmity, as if we're destined to fight. I come from a Christian tradition and I've engaged for many years with evangelicals, and I look at how evangelicals describe this conflict. Do you know what they say? They say that this is a biblical thing because Isaac and Ishmael are destined to fight. I mean, if this is the kind of worldview we're bringing as people of faith to a difficult reality like this, I don't know, I mean, so many mistakes theologically, historically, and the whole idea of presenting Muslims and Jews as if they're destined to fight is wrong, is misguiding, and more importantly, it dehumanizes people. And it cripples us as if it puts us, we're destined to fight and hate one another. So I emphasize there is no religious conflict. We're dealing with the reality of settler colonialism in Palestine, and right now, more precisely, a system of apartheid. Yes. This is the situation in Palestine. Having said that it's not a religious conflict, I also want to emphasize that as people of faith, to us, Palestine is an ethical, moral cause. Yes. It's about justice. It's about equality. It's about human rights. And if we are not leading the charge about the oppression of people in an injustice way, the stealing of land, the restriction of freedoms, who is going to lead that way? And if we're not saying enough is enough about the constant, systematic, year after year dehumanization of the Palestinians, to the extent that right now we're still listening to people justifying and defending this current genocide, I don't know who's going to step up and speak if it's not us people of faith. So it is an ethical cause. It's a moral obligation for us to speak, especially in the wake of the silence of many. And when I say the silence of many, I don't mean the streets. Let's be honest. The silence of many, if not most, faith leaders. A silence that was so loud. They didn't care, maybe. Or maybe they wanted to avoid controversy. And those who heard me preach in December, this was the culmination of numerous conversations I've had with many faith leaders, especially Christian faith leaders, and the culmination of frustration over their silence and complicity, and not just the silence, but continuing to repeat the Zionist rationale: Israel has the sacred duty to defend itself. This is something we continue to hear even today, which completely misses the point of settler colonialism, the point of apartheid. This is exactly the equivalence of someone saying and arguing, well, in South Africa, the apartheid regime has the right to defend itself. This is what we were told over and over and over, again, by faith leaders. We also know that religion has become part of the problem, sadly. And we will be not just blind, but wrong to ignore this, and we will be wrong not to challenge it, namely the weaponization of our sacred text to justify and call for violence. And it's in all traditions, it's in all religions. Let's be honest with ourselves. I want to speak to, particularly, to my Christian friends. I don't like the habit of calling out other religions. I'll leave it to everyone to self-criticize. But if I talk about our own Christian tradition, we're so good at pointing fingers at the others. We're so good at saying, look at the so-called, as they described. I've heard it many times, let's be honest, the violent nature of Islam and the Quran and what they teach. As if we don't have radicals, by the way. As if we don't have people who call for the total destruction of Gaza, pastors, theologians, in this current war. I can tell you example after example. And as if we don't have a violent, racist history ourselves as Christians. Every time people ask me about the challenge of radical Islam and the threat they pose to Israel, I ask, sorry to say, have you no shame asking this question? Who slaughtered 6 million Jews 80 years ago? Was it Arabs? Was it Muslims? So we have to fight this kind of stereotype in which, we demonize others as Christians and forget the extremists among us and the tendencies to be prejudiced and racist towards others among us. I think this is in all traditions. And as I said, we will be wrong if we do not call out our own traditions. Not just for their extremism, but for their apathy, for their silence. As I've been saying, silence is complicity in this religion, in this camp. And I feel bad, honestly, to say this, that as I continue to speak, many people come and talk to me and say, you have courage, we wish our leaders are speaking. I hear it from all faiths. And I feel sad because what courage does it mean to come and speak and say there is a genocide in Gaza? The real courage is what the people of Gaza are doing, are manifesting. And so I think you all agree with me that good people were missing in this war, who speak out openly. Again, maybe not in the streets, because we're so grateful about that. And one question I kept saying is that where was the church in the midst of this genocide to comfort, to challenge, to speak out? And as I say now, where are the good people? Sadly, religion has become part of the problem in our part of the world. And if we're not willing to confront our own traditions, our own complicity in this, so we need to step up and really be courageous and doing self-criticism. That's why I'm grateful, for example, for groups like Jews for Peace, Jewish Voices for Peace, or both, in their open and direct criticism, not just of Israel. We need to be careful here. It's good to say, it's very comfortable to say, well, Israel is not a perfect state, they do mistakes. As I always hear from liberal faith leaders, we can't criticize Israel. But to criticize and call out and condemn Zionism as racism and supremacy. And I'm very grateful that Jewish voices now are challenging Zionism. This is the kind of courage we need from faith traditions, to call out the own extremists in our own traditions. Part of my message in this tour is to emphasize that this is a Kairos moment. This is a divine moment that demands action, and that demands that we step away from previous responses. We can't continue in the same way we have been speaking or acting. We can't continue to pray for peace and hold both sides equally. We can't continue to send our best and we can't continue to be content with charity. Charity is good, but it doesn't solve the problem. You will continue to give, by the way, if this is the method we're approaching. This is a Kairos moment that demands new ways of doing things, and it demands in particular, as I was told, this is an interfaith gathering, it demands in particular new ways of doing interfaith solidarity, maybe interfaith alliances for justice. We're used to doing interfaith, shaking hands, singing maybe together, giving speeches, and then going home feeling good about ourselves. Have we solved the injustice in our worlds, in our neighborhoods? Have we actually solved the prejudice within each one of us or within our congregations? What we need is new ways of doing injustice. And I've seen it throughout this tour. I've seen Christians, Muslims, and Jews coming together in an unprecedented way. I was very encouraged, very moved to see really people coming together and in exactly the kind of setting like this, grassroots movements. Usually when we say, in my Christian tradition, where is the church? The first thing that comes to mind, where is the heads, the big figures. But let's remember, the church is the people. It's the grassroots, it's a movement. And in the same way, I think the way forward is the coming together of many and more groups like this. Interfaith solidarity that recognize again the urgency of the moment. Friends, we can't wait any longer. This is indeed a Kairos moment. A Kairos moment that demands that we use the right language and use the right descriptions. And so I plead with you, stop talking about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. There is no conflict in Palestine. We're dealing with settler colonialism, and precisely we're dealing with apartheid. Before the war, for at least 2 to 3 years, I've devoted so much of my time with Kairos Palestine and many other Palestinian Christian activists to challenge the church to recognize Israel as an apartheid state. We were not being radical, friends. This is what's so hard to explain. We were not being this radical fringe group. We were simply asking the church to recognize the numerous reports of organizations like Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, Israeli organizations like B'Tselem and PhD, and of course before that Palestinians demonstrated that this is apartheid, Al-Haq, and many others, and Badr. Of course, because of the prejudice of the Western world, no one listens to Palestinian reports. But then you have UN reports, international reports, and I was shocked that the very same white Western Christian who lecture us on international law and human rights ignore these reports. Why? Why are these reports ignored? This is the real question we must be asking. So enough talking about a conflict and peace and reconciliation in Palestine. And by the way, this is something I really learned from our South African friends, the Kairos South Africa document. Because for years I've engaged so much with what the South Africa document called the state theology, the theology of the empire, I call it, the theology that calls us to, that promotes prejudice and supremacy and power. And in our context, it's Christian Zionism. In the African context, it was the theology of apartheid and so on. But the Kairos South Africa document also introduces another kind of theology which is the church theology. The theology that's complicit through talking all the time about peace, conciliation, the two sides of the story, and just want to, lead us into this fruitless efforts of dialogue that does not challenge the ideologies of supremacy and that does not call for the end of apartheid. So we need to stop talking in the old way and really relate to Israel for what it truly is. And this is important. How is it that someone who's committing war crimes and leading apartheid welcomed in the Congress as a hero?
Mm-hmm.
And if people of faith are not willing to protest this in a loud and unified manner, then who will? Leaving it to the amazing, courageous university students. So proud of them. They are now, they hold the moral integrity of this country, it seems. So I call on faith leaders to support them, to be with them, to join them, to sustain them, to defend them. Some of them are facing lawsuits. And again, if it's not the faith leaders who do this, unified, saying not in our name, well, again, it's not a religious cause for one religion, but it's a cause for our humanity, and we do it because we care for justice. It's time that religious leaders step up their faith. It's time, as I said, when it comes to using the right language, it's time to call Zionism for what it truly is. Friends, Zionism, and I keep hearing this is a Zionist state, this is a Zionist, we have many Zionists here. Zionism, in its definition, is about exclusion and ethnic cleansing. In its definition. Here's what I mean. Zionism believes they wanted to create a homeland for the Jewish people in Palestine. A homeland for the Jews. It's a Jewish state by definition. A Jewish state is exclusive in definition, and then in someone else's land, meaning you will ethnically cleanse. Zionism didn't seek to come to Palestine to live with the Arabs. In the past, Jews, when they were persecuted from Christians, they would take refuge with the Arabs and Muslims. And that was accepted, that was fine. Actually, they welcomed them. We welcomed them. Jews lived in Palestine for generations. But to create a homeland for yourself on someone else's land necessitates the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. So we need to talk about Zionism for what it truly is. We can't continue to be balanced with terms and with concepts, especially when Zionism today is conducting a genocide, and our biggest fear is that things will escalate to the West Bank. Read the reports. Read the reports about what might happen in the West Bank. So we need you to act, we need you to lead, we need you to hold your governments accountable. Many times when I speak in the United States, I have to remind you that this is a different situation than if I speak in any other country. For mainly, or at least two reasons. First, Israel cannot do what it's doing in Gaza or in the West Bank without your money, without your tax money. Are you okay with the way your tax money is being spent? No. If you're silent, that means you're okay. If you're not protesting, that means you're okay. If all you say, well, I'm not happy with that, that means you're okay. And in the same way, Israel cannot conduct this war if it wasn't for the constant political cover and support from the United States, all the way to vetoes in the United Nations, or to stop the call for a ceasefire, whether in LA or any other city councils. So these are people you elected. And if you are not willing to hold them accountable, again, then who will? So Americans cannot say, well, it's not our cause. No, you can't say that, because it's the people you elect and the money you pay that empowers and enables this genocide. You might think this is not fair. I think it's not fair if you don't speak, if you don't make your voices heard. So this is my message to you today. And believe me, there is so much at stake that depends on your leadership. Whether it's the future of Palestine and Gaza and our region. Who knows, by the time we finish this meeting, how many people more would have been killed. But it's also our collective humanity, our collective human conscience. For if we are okay with the genocide being broadcasted live to the world, something is wrong with us as a humanity. Something is wrong. It's about our credibility as people of faith. Believe me, people have given up on religion because of us.
Yeah.
I've heard it from so many. Again, I'm going to criticize my own tradition. You know how many people told me we left the church since the war broke? People are traumatized. We're not leading. We're not providing answers. Actually, many times, we're adding to the problem. We're adding to the polarization. We're adding to the extremism. So there is so much at stake. Let's act. And precisely, let us help the world imagine a different way. In the same way, the civil rights movement was an interfaith movement. I hope that the movement, and in the same way, the whole world united to end apartheid in South Africa. It is due time for the whole world, people of faith from different faith traditions, to unite to end apartheid in Palestine and to end this genocide. Thank you.